There was a victory in Chicago last week, a wonderful, wonderful victory. The Chicago public school system, which has nearly 400,000 students, it's the third largest school system in the country. The majority of the students are poor, black, and brown. Of the 25,000 teachers are represented by Chicago's Teachers Union, Local 1 of the American Federation of Teachers, and there were 7,500 education support staff in the Service Employees Union, SEIU, Local 73. The teachers ended their victorious 11-day strike with a 5-year contract on October 31st. They won almost all of their demands, which we'll go into in a minute. 2 lessons can be drawn from the Chicago teachers' strike. The first is what they fought for. They won, and this is the most important lesson, they won with a Marxist-Leninist strategy, which goes by a number of different names. Social justice unionism, bargaining for the common good, workers' power, or just plain working class organizing. One article I used as a resource traced the concept back to the Wobblies, the industrial workers of the world founded in Chicago in 1905, which called for one big union regardless of industry, trade, craft, gender, or race. But actually, I discovered while I was copy editing an article in the new issue of Workers' World, the concept can be traced back to, as you might guess, to Marx. In an article about the lessons of the Harvard workers' strike of 2016, Ed Childs quotes from Marx about organizing. And I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs here. What Marx wrote in Trade Unions, Their Past, Present, and Future in 1866 applies totally today. Apart from their original purposes, unions must now learn to act deliberately as organizing centers of the working class in the broad interest of its complete emancipation. They must aid every social and political movement tending in that direction, considering themselves and acting as the champions representing the whole working class. That cannot fail to enlist the non-society workers into their ranks. They must look carefully after the interests of the worst paid trades, such as the agricultural laborers and today the service proletariat, including precarious workers, rendered powerless by exceptional circumstances. They must convince the world at large that their efforts, far from narrow and selfish, aim at the emancipation of the downtrodden millions. Pretty good, huh? The Chicago Teachers Union, the CTU, is led by a left-leaning caucus of rank-and-file educators, that's their title, which grew out of the CTU's groundbreaking 2012 strike. Given that orientation, they rooted their demands in the needs of their students, the majority living in poor families in a city with equally persistent poverty and racial segregation. For instance, out of a student body of nearly 400,000 students, it's estimated that 17,000 children are homeless. That's why one of the teachers' demands was to address affordable housing. Though Mayor Lori Lightfoot refused to address it in the contract, she did promise to work on it in the future. We will see if she follows through. But one community issue was won. Sanctuary protection for undocumented immigrants on school property. As far as I know, that's a first. I have not heard of it in other contracts. We may be hearing more about that in the course of the 5-year contract. Here's how the teachers summed up their vision of social justice unionism. They were fighting for smaller class sizes, fair pay and benefits, fully staffed supports, and justice for families. The hard-fought 5-year, $1.5 billion contract includes a 16% pay raise for teachers and a very long overdue 40% raise for teaching assistants, clerks, and other low-paid workers. Over $35 million will be devoted to shrinking oversized classrooms, prioritizing schools with the most at-risk students, they're segregated, and hiring a full-time social worker and nurse in every school, though that may take the full length of the 5-year contract. The last thing the teachers fought for and won was for the city to pay all education workers for 5 of the days they were out during the strike. And I'll tell you, that was not a part of their original deal at all. They just stayed out one more day and Lightfoot caved. I know, isn't that wonderful? Anyway, the second lesson in their win was how they organized, how they put participatory democracy into practice. CTU's House of Delegates, which has elected representatives from 700 schools, met repeatedly to prepare before the strike. Delegates were given work plans to help them organize daily pickets at every school, which totally depended on complete rank and file participation. And the delegates met often during the strike to learn about the day's negotiations and to reinforce the fighting will and spirit of the bargaining team. No wonder the massive turnout of tens of thousands of teachers, staff, and union and community allies was there at nearly every daily march and rally. Despite drenching rain and snow on October 25th, the chants of, "If we don't get it, shut it down," rang through the streets. One handmade picket sign carried that day read, "I solemnly swear I will never stop fighting for my students." It totally makes me verklempt every time I think about that. Contrast CTU's winning strategy, firmly rooted in traditional working class organizing, with how the United Auto Workers conducted its concurrent 40-day strike. While the UAW convened the House of Delegates for discussion of the tentative agreement, the union leadership did not involve the delegates on a day-to-day basis. I hasten to point out UAW members were mostly led by their locals, which organized for around-the-clock picket duty on a daily basis. In a WW article about the UAW struggle in this issue, Martha Gravatt points out how the UAW leadership forgot its working class roots, based in the strong Flint sit-down strike in 1936-37, after the 1950s anti-communist Red Scare that pushed progressives out of unions. So UAW organizing was more along the lines of business unionism, where the issues focus on wages and not, in the case of the GM strike, not on solidarity with low-paid temp workers or plant shutdowns that have a disastrous effect on nearby working class communities. But that's another issue that we can't address here. In summing up the CTU strike, President of Local 1, Jesse Sharkey, noted, "Did we accomplish every single little thing? No. But I can say that we moved the needle on educational justice in the city." Sharkey also proudly summed up that the teachers, quote, showed the city what it means to care, to put yourself forward, to sacrifice, to achieve something. As the UAW strike was drawing to a close and the CTU strike was going full throttle, an article appeared in the October 28th in these Times that estimated that at least 85,000 workers participated in 13 different U.S. strikes the week of October 21st. That definitely shows a resurgence of the U.S. labor movement, and we need to know that. It's very important for our organizing. The article traces the projection of education workers' strikes, starting with the CTU victory in 2012 and moving from West Virginia in 2016 to Los Angeles in 2018. The article linked the education workers' struggle in LA, which won smaller class sizes and the hiring of more nurses and guidance counselors, to inspiring Chicago teachers to fight for these demands. As the article sums up, the final CTU deal shows that strikes work. Now, the teachers' victory, which serves the huge multinational working class community of Chicago, some even say that the teachers' win transformed this city, if only, deserves to be celebrated throughout the U.S. and the global working class movement, even if right-wing naysayers denounce the generous contract as costing too much. But according to CTU Vice President Stacey Davis Gates, quote, "In comparison to the rest of the state, we still have less staff. We're at the minimum. So to hear a discussion arise about, oh my God, it's going to cost too much money, no, quite frankly, it should be costing a lot more money."